Welcome to the Tanyaacker Show. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass recently described the ongoing immigration raids by masked ICE agents as creating a reign of terror in the city. In response to those raids, Public Counsel, which is the nation's largest provider of free legal services, along with other civil rights organizations, including the ACLU, filed a motion in federal court challenging those raids. Mark Rosenbaum is the lawyer from Public Counsel who argued the motion. Public Counsel represented all of the impacted plaintiffs, and they won. Mark is here with me today to talk about why they filed this motion, what the court has prohibited the government from doing, and what we all can expect to happen next. I should also point out that I have been a longtime board member and supporter of Public Counsel, and while I had nothing to do with the filing of this motion, I could not be prouder of this work. So here I am with Mark Rosenbaum. Please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and please support Public Counsel. Here I am with Mark. Welcome to the podcast, Mark Rosenbaum. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm eager to talk with you.
I'm eager to have you here. And as I mentioned in the intro, I know you. I have been a longtime board member of Public Counsel. And this recent motion is something that I think is particularly important work. So let's get right into that. Public Counsel, along with the ACLU, and other civil rights organizations recently filed a temporary restraining order. And for the non-lawyers listening, that's a request for emergency relief. And they filed that TRO against the federal government. And the basis of it was the manner in which the immigration raids that have been taking place in California have been conducted. Tell us why you filed that motion, and you also argued the motion. But talk to us about why you filed the TRO.
Because since June 6, the city of Los Angeles has been under siege. It's unprecedented. There has been a militarization of immigration, ICE, and other federal agents that have come into the city. The promise, the statement for which we were told they were coming, had to do with safety, public safety. What the president said, as you know, is that the cities were being overrun by killers, rapists, and drug dealers, and that they were here illegally in the country, and that it was necessary to send immigration agents to address that public safety. That turns out to be a complete lie. The efforts here in Los Angeles by federal agents have focused on car wash workers, on nannies, on farm workers, on day laborers. It has been conducted in a way that is irrelevant, whatever your legal status is. And individuals have been swept into facilities, which I'll come to in a moment, based on their skin color, based on their racial appearance, based on where they happen to be, a bus stop, car wash. Killers and rapists don't hang out at bus stops. And based on whether or not they spoke Spanish. That's it. That's been the entire rationale that has been utilized. Those individuals have been swept in unprecedented numbers. They've been taken to a basement facility in downtown Los Angeles where they have been systematically denied access to counsel and put in what was meant to be a temporary detention center for like 12 hours. They put in for as long as 12 days. No beds, no showers, no regular meals. Water comes out of a spigot that serves as a toilet. And during that period of time, they have had no access to lawyers whatsoever. So because of the way that individuals were swept up and because they were denied access to lawyers to be able to exercise their basic rights, we went in with the groups that you're talking about, and we went to a federal judge. And we said, this is not a complicated legal issue. This is not a complicated constitutional issue. Law enforcement can approach individuals, can detain individuals, can arrest individuals, but only if they have some particularized knowledge. They can't just racially profile. The federal judge took a look at what was happening. The federal government could not come up with a single document from June 16 until last Thursday, could not come up with a single document that showed that they had any basis other than skin color for the stops, arrest, and then putting them in this detention center and we obtained 2 temporary restraining orders to say that you cannot racially profile in our community, and you've got to give people access to counsel.
Let's talk about some of the particular facts and the evidence that you brought before the court, because a lot of people have seen clips of this. We're seeing it on social, but social media evidence is different than the evidence that one must provide to a legal decision maker, and that will win a case, or in this case, a motion. So talk a little bit about some of the specific facts that you brought to the court's attention in support of your motion.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because, I'm very proud of what Public Counsel and our other organizations. Also should mention, Tanya, that 2 law firms, the Hecker-Fink law firm and the Munger-Tolles law firm, have stepped up. That's pretty rare these days. As we know, law firms and the bar is under assault, and these firms stood up with us. But it wasn't the lawyers that obtained these temporary restraining orders. We didn't win this. We're good lawyers, but what won it were the individuals that we're talking about, hardworking people who were at Home Depot or were at a bus stop. And they took on the President of the United States, and they told their stories of citizens who were Latino and were thrown to the ground, no questions asked, handcuffed, dragged, people pulled out of cars, people at bus stops just being told with guns pointing at their face and being told, you're coming down, you're here illegally in the country. No reasonable suspicion. We said to the government, show us a single document that demonstrates that you are doing something other than racial profiling. The government could not come up with a single document after weeks in this community. We happen to have one such document for the plaintiffs, and all it talked about was the fact that that individual was Latino. The evidence, the failure of the government to have any evidence, when you get a speeding ticket, there is more particularized knowledge, facts about who you are and what you did than any single document we saw from the federal government. The ringmaster, the Stephen Miller, when the judge issued an order, and all the judge's order said was, you can't racially profile. You can't rely upon where a person happens to be. You can't rely upon an occupation of an individual. Stephen Miller said, that means that this is a communist judge. That was the word he used. And someone needs to explain to Stephen Miller the difference between communism and democracy. When those individuals were then taken to this basement, it's a dungeon, to this basement area. One point, the ICE employees moved the individuals out of there to another facility. They said that there were demonstrations. There was no demonstration on June 7th, the morning of June 7th when that happened. The day before, there had been a demonstration, peaceful demonstration, 20 miles in Paramount from where that facility is. But the story I want to tell you that was part of this case was that there were lawyers there who wanted to talk to these individuals, lawyers and family members. And on the door, ICE had posted a sign saying, you can't come in. We'll close for the day. Imagine that. Closed to talk to lawyers. So the lawyers started shouting, you have a right to a lawyer, to this van that included these detainees. And what was the response by the ICE agents? Response by the ICE agents was to blare the horn on these vans so that the individuals could not hear that they were entitled to have access to a lawyer. Those are the sort of facts that we're talking about. In that facility, there's not a single confidential telephone by which someone can talk to a lawyer. They were crowded into cell blocks, 60 to a cell block, no privacy whatsoever, the conditions that we're describing. So in my experience, which goes back 51 years, it is the most abuse of force that I've seen in any such effort. And you'll remember, Tanya, that in MacArthur Park, which is a midtown park in Los Angeles, in the midst of all this, the government put on a military display. The government took out armored cars. The government went on horseback with weapons, and they paraded to make this show of force. And when I said to the government lawyer, why are your agents wearing masks and carrying guns? The response by the government agent is, well, you should get used to it. That's what happened during COVID. So that's the sort of set of facts that we had. Not a single fact that showed that the government was operating based on any particularized information. No warrants, no particularized somebody has overstayed a visa, someone's committed a crime, nothing like this. According to the federal government, this individual's criminal activity began and ended with the fact that they were Latino.
Let's circle back to the point you raised about the arrest and detention and deportation of those involved in criminal activity, dangerous criminals, drug dealers, violent folks. And there is broad support, I think, across party lines, across the country for finding, detaining, deporting those folks. How many people, or roughly, what percentage of those who are caught up in these sweeps fall into that category?
Well, that's an easy answer. The government has not come forward with a single individual who's a killer, a single individual who's a rapist, a single individual who's a drug dealer. If that were true, you'd be seeing that every day. But as I said earlier, killers and rapists don't go to Home Depot. They don't go to swap meets. They don't go to bus stops. And that's where they don't go to schools. They've gone to schools. They don't go to churches. That's where the government has trained its activities. So this has been a big lie. It's a serious lie. What the government did when we got the temporary restraining orders was finally held accountable for this. But they still need to be held accountable because that continues to be the justification that is being utilized.
The point you raise about the masks, to me, is particularly pertinent. I find it interesting that the justification is COVID when very few people are masking for anything these days. But the notion of having to surrender your body and person to a person who's providing neither any identification that proves that they are in law enforcement, nor can you even see their faces. I mean, that strikes me as unusual. So is that their justification for wearing the masks, COVID? Because that seems ludicrous.
Ludicrous is being polite, isn't it? And these aren't these medical masks. These aren't the masks that...
they're like scarves. They're like almost wearing...
They're like black scarves.
Right.
That's what I specifically said to the lawyer. Your folks are running around with these black masks and guns. And he said, well, got to get used to it because it's COVID. But it's not only absurd, it's just the brazenness by which they are operating that they feel that they can make statements like that and get away with that. And that is, as you know, what is happening in our community. And that's as serious as it can get. And, you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about the civil rights groups and the immigrants' rights groups that are part of this. But it's not just that. The city of Los Angeles has joined this. The county of Los Angeles has joined this. 7 other cities, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, a number of other neighboring cities have joined this. The state of California has joined this, all on the side. In my experience, I've never seen a group that is fighting back at the federal government that includes not just individuals, not just the community, but city, county, and state government that says, look, if you want to carry out your operations, that's your prerogative, but you can't treat us as ground zero with the sort of military siege that has been taking place in the city. And, people are fearful. People are frightened. And part of the motive here, I think is pretty clear, is to try to wreck the economy of this city. This city is on edge. Businesses have been affected. I've been talking to some of the major business groups in this community that are going to come on board and joining with respect to this. You don't hear about this in Texas. You don't hear about this in Florida. This is an attack on this community, and that is not what the federal government is supposed to be about.
Compare the tactics that are being used in these raids to law enforcement tactics in other contexts. So, for instance, if someone sees a woman being assaulted on the street, and then a masked man who provides no identification goes up to the assailant and says, I'm taking you into custody, Would that hold water? Would that stand?
The mask part is a problem, isn't it, in terms of what the response is. And it's hard to understand what sort of reasonable justification is for that. When law enforcement operates with us, part of the agreement is we know who they are. They wear a badge. They identify themselves. They have a number. So that, and what are they saying when they're doing that? What they're saying when they're doing that is, if you think we're acting improperly, we're going to identify ourselves. You can take that. But your example is a really strong one, because if someone sees an assailant and is law enforcement, well, of course we expect them to step in under those sorts of circumstances. In this community, there are 5 million Latinos in the county of Los Angeles, 2 million in the city of Los Angeles. That's hardly the same thing as actually observing a crime in progress. That's, to talk like a lawyer, but anybody who watches Law and Order knows this, that's reasonable suspicion to stop. It's probable cause to arrest. We don't have anything like that. Color of your skin is becoming a proxy for illegality to the federal government. And this harkens back to the days of the Bracero program, the sorts of days when immigration would just rampage throughout communities, looking for every Latino or every individual. One person came up, gave me a call and said, my family was involved with what happened in World War II with the Japanese American community. And that's what this person said this reminded me of, that individuals were demonized, were criminalized, were stigmatized based on their racial or ethnic background. And I don't think those are far-fetched circumstances. Going back to the Miller point, not only did he say this judge was a communist, but he said this is the president's discretion, and if the president wants to do this, the courts are supposed to stand aside. It's not while they build courtrooms, but again, it's evidence of just how brazen this operation is, when the belief is this is precisely how we can proceed. This is the way you take apart a democracy.
If you just look at it from a public safety standpoint, if people can have their persons accosted by masked men who don't have to identify themselves, then what's to stop any bad person from donning a mask, grabbing a 15-year-old kid off the street and doing whatever he likes with her? I mean, it's really, we're setting it's a very bad precedent.
We've heard of that happening. We've heard of kids staying out of school for those very same reasons. We've heard of citizens who are carrying around passports. That was what a dumpas was in South Africa during apartheid, when individuals of color had to carry around a passport. And people feel in Los Angeles in 2025, that's what they have to do when law enforcement is wearing masks, carrying guns, and only asking about your appearance before they bring you in.
In addition to the whole rule of law aspect and the reasonable suspicion aspect of it, some folks are being rounded up who have every legal right to be here. Talk a little bit about that. What's happening in those circumstances? Someone's got a green card, or maybe someone has, or someone's a citizen.
One of the reasons that the lawyers want to have access is because, look, immigration law has been described by the courts as a labyrinth. And the way that the administration has presented it, it's an easy question. No, it's not. We have individuals who have been here 20 years. We have individuals who have children who have, in fact, good asylum claims. We have people who have basis for being in this country. I mean, my God, who are these people? These are the people, they're part of our community. They're the people who make our economy run in many instances. They're people we know. They're people we trust our children with. There are people who are part of our lives. And it's not for law enforcement to make a conclusive determination. And what you say is exactly right. This has swept in citizens. It has swept in individuals who have legal status. I mean, a case that Public Counsel had a few weeks ago involving a 4-year-old who was being treated for short bowel syndrome and had come to the United States, had a lawful basis to be here, the mom and the child, was being treated at Children's Hospital. And the mom got a notice saying, you must leave the country immediately, even though the time wasn't up. And even though there was no dispute that that child would die within days of being removed, that didn't make any difference here. So rule of law, those temporary restrainings have brought back the rule of law, and it's all of our responsibility to make sure that it stays.
The issue, I think, for all of us to think about is first they come for the people who are not you and who may not look like you, but ultimately, if people who are agents or purporting to be agents of the government can yank people off the street, then you got next. So we all need to be careful.
And that is what's so inspiring here. Like I said to you, I'm proud of what Public Counsel has done and what Public Counsel is doing, as well as all our organizations that we're partnering with. But come on, the people who are standing up are not the people with affluence, the people who are not being affected most directly. They are the car wash workers and the nannies, and they are doing that on behalf of democracy. They are doing it on behalf of our communities. They're doing it upon what we think is our most important sort of values, and that's really what's stopping the cycle that you're talking about. But you see it every day. You see the sorts of threats and intimidations, and they're working. And the first stage in the destruction of every democracy is voluntary acquiescence. And that's what I think is our call to make sure that that doesn't happen.
You talk about some of the people who are being caught up in these sweeps and in this anti-immigrant movement. They include, I think, incredibly appallingly, people who have fought and put their lives on their line for this country in a way that a lot of citizens haven't. Talk a little bit about that, because I know that Public Counsel's represented some of these veterans.
We do represent veterans. As you know, we're involved in a case right now to stop the obscenity of homeless veterans and veterans who have been held that, yes, you can serve your country that way, but your country's not going to serve you. It's not a surprise that citizens and veterans and those with status and those who are far from killers, rapists, and drug dealers are being swept up, because the government is operating without any sort of particularized basis. There's plenty of room for so-called error because it was never their intent to get it right. Their intent was to create fear. It's working. To create terror. It's working. And to sweep up as many individuals and to sort out sometimes people say it's ready, fire, aim. This is just ready, fire. And they're bringing all these individuals. And you know that they're afraid because they don't want them talking to counsel. When you hear them blaring that horn so that individuals are not even able to hear lawyers saying that we're here. I asked the lawyer for the government during the hearing, are individuals even told that there are lawyers out there? The answer was no. We have situations where lawyers come to this facility when they finally get in, rarely, but occasionally, before the TRO, and they said, is my client here? And the response, and this is the literal response from an ICE agent, was, that's above my pay grade. And the response was, well, what's their A number? And an A number is what you get when you're arrested. It's routine. You're picked up at the border. You're immediately assigned an A number. And the response from the ICE agent was, well, we haven't assigned A numbers. It takes over a week at minimum to get an A number. So they don't even know who's in their own facility, and they don't even care who's in their facility, and they don't even know where their individuals are. And that tells you how much they value the sanctity of these human lives. They are being treated as if they're disposable. They're being treated as if they're terrorists. They're being treated as if they don't count. And as you said at the beginning, our nation had lots of flaws when it was founded, but at least it respected the notion that no individual is to be treated in a way that law enforcement can just rampage all over their rights.
And there are quotas as well, correct? There are actually quotas that are put on that have been put in place to ensure that they're bringing in the right amount of people. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Quotas are what's driving this. We know that, there were numbers that were being picked up each day. That what we heard was in the neighborhood of 300 individuals nationwide. And Stephen Miller went into a temper tantrum and said, no, you are, the phrases, you are to get creative with this. The incentive is not to acknowledge the rights of an individual. The incentive is to get as many individuals into these detention facilities and out of the country, and constitutional rights get in the way of quotas.
Tell us specifically what the court ruling means. What did the court say that the government must do or stop doing?
That's one of the most important questions you could ask. The actual ruling is about as modest as it could be. It simply says that if ICE is going to conduct operations and other federal agents, Border Patrol agents, are going to conduct operations here, there are certain things they can't do. They can't pick up people simply based on their race or ethnicity or appearance. They can't pick up people simply because an individual happens to be at a particular location, a Home Depot, car wash, a bus stop. They can't pick up people simply because they happen to speak Spanish. That's all the order said. If there are factors that actually point to someone being here illegally in the country that are meaningful, well, then of course they can do it. It was that modest. The other TRO said, look, if you're going to bring people into a facility, you've got to give them access to lawyers. In 2025, that is not revolutionary. It's certainly not communist, as Stephen Miller said. So these were quite modest. And interestingly, the government is not appealing the attorney. They know they've been caught on that one, but they are fighting to be able to bring people in, attacking that order based on racial profiling. And when Judge Frimpong said to the government lawyer said to Judge Frimpong, if you're going to issue this order, the immigrants have to put up $30 million in order to train our agents to comply with your order. That is Kafka's on its face. But think about the implications of that. The government is saying we're going to have to retrain all our individuals to teach them that racially profiling violates the Constitution. So that was quite an admission as well. But the order itself, a first-year law student could write. Somebody who watches Law and Order could write in terms of basic principles.
So the government's not appealing the requirement that it provide access to lawyers. It is appealing the order that says that you can't just stop detain and bring people into custody because of where they work or how they look or the language they're speaking.
They're even saying that they should be entitled to a stay of that order, meaning if this thing goes into effect, they will suffer injury. And the judge said to the government lawyer, what's the irreparable injury from my order? And the government couldn't pick to a single fact. I mean, when it becomes irreparable injury to comply with the Constitution, that becomes a pretty serious matter.
So did the government get that stay pending an appeal?
The first go round, they screwed up procedurally. Friday morning, they refiled for the stay, and the court has not acted as of Friday afternoon.
So with respect to the order that they'll certainly appeal, that will be heard before 3 judges. I had information, maybe you certainly know more, but that the 3 judges who would hear the appeal are 3 Trump appointees. Is that accurate?
I don't know. I honestly don't know who they will be. Their names have not been. We've gotten some procedural orders from the court, but no judges' names have been attached to it. So I don't know. Are
you hopeful that the order will stand on appeal?
Well, I think the soul of this community depends on its standing. As I said, I've done decades of cases that have put forth novel theories of the Constitution that have been successful. This isn't a novel theory. Telling law enforcement, whether it's the federal government or, as you suggested earlier, some cop on the beat, that you have to have reasonable suspicion and you have to have probable cause if you're first going to detain and then arrest somebody, and that you can't use race as a proxy for either. That is not a radical proposition. So, yes, I'm hopeful. And as I said, I think it's the sort of principle that a democracy depends on.
To your point, that's not even con law 101. That's first season Law and Order, frankly. That's pretty basic. So, Mark,
so is a right to a lawyer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when you hear the advisals on a television show that you have a right to a lawyer, nobody gasps and says, "What is that about?" But as I said, downtown Los Angeles in a basement dungeon, attorneys were deliberately kept out. And there's only one conclusion to draw from that, and that is the federal government doesn't want people to know their rights and exercise those rights.
A big question that people have, those in targeted communities and those who aren't, is what rights people do have right now. So let's say you're in a coffee shop, walking down the street, working at a car wash, trying to get work at a Home Depot, shopping with your kids, what have you. You're approached by folks with badges. Maybe they're covering the badges, so you can't really see what the badge, what agency issued the badge. They are wearing masks, so you can't see their faces, and they're not presenting any identification. And they ask you for information. They ask you to identify yourself. They ask you to volunteer information. What rights do people have in that kind of circumstance?
There's two answers to that. The first thing is, as a general principle, you don't have to talk to law enforcement. People all the time decide that they want to go about their business. And so you can say to an officer, silence, or you can say to an officer, excuse me, I choose not to speak to you at this time. And you don't have to do anything more. If you have legal status, I don't mean being a citizen, as I said, you don't have to carry a passport around. If you have, as you said earlier, a green card, if you applied for asylum, then you have to show those papers. But the general rule is, whether you're walking on the street, as you described, whether you're in a car, and we've had people pulled out of cars, you don't have to do that. That's a police state when you have to answer each and every question. That's a precious right. It's not evidence of guilt. It's evidence of the fact that you're a private individual and you want to carry on your business. I want to expand your question in one way, which is, whoever you are, I don't think in Los Angeles in 2025, there is a higher duty that if you witness what you're describing, you're not the person necessarily who the law enforcement came up to. But if you witness it, you need to do your part to observe, to make a note of what happened, and then to come forward with that. The one thing that this government cannot handle is the truth. Why we succeeded was because a lot of people did come forward. There is a car wash outaways where ICE kept coming back and doing the sorts of things we've been talking about in our conversation. The owner of that car wash, who was not approached, provided a statement when he witnessed the sorts of activity, the masked people coming in. That individual is a hero. And that's on all of us, not to turn away, to make certain that when you witness the sorts of things that we've been seeing in our community, that you document it, that you take your phone and film it, and that you speak to people about what you saw. Is that easy? Nope. Is that mean that the government is going to, give you a Medal of Honor? Nope. But it is our duty. It is our duty to the residents and individuals who are our brothers and sisters when they're treated this way. It's your duty to the community. It's your duty to your heritage, because virtually every one of us is an immigrant or comes from an immigrant family. And it really is the ultimate statement. When I think about this, I think when you talk to your kids about what matters in life, about how you live your life and how you want them to live their life, words matter, but examples matter more. And that's on the entire community to stand up and say, you cannot treat us like we are in military operation. You cannot treat individuals based on who they are racially. And that's on all of us. You have a right to witness it. You have a right to document it. You have a right to stand up for what's right.
There were some pretty compelling examples that you provided in the complaint of folks standing up. And I think it was in the car wash, I believe, where the ICE officers pulled weapons, drew weapons on an unarmed civilian, and onlookers were like, don't shoot, don't shoot. There's another example that you cite where, again, another unarmed person was being chased by law enforcement who said, I'll fucking kill you. Do I have that? Do I have that example right?
Yeah, and people were thrown to the ground for what? Not because they were killers, rapists, or drug dealers, but because they had a color of their skin that wasn't favorable to the government. But that's what I mean when I say I'm not being modest. I'm a good lawyer, and the lawyers I'm working with are good lawyers. We didn't win this. It was those stories that won it, because that's the truth. That's what happened. That's what moved a judge. That's what should move all of us. And, you're a friend, but I'm on this podcast because everybody needs to know this is what's happening in our community, and everyone needs to take a stand as to what's right and what's wrong.
Everything you say is true, but I am going to take issue with one thing. You are one of the best and most potent civil rights forces in the country. And I am really proud and honored to be a part of the work that you do. And I also want to give a shout out to the rest of the incredible team at Public Counsel who worked on this case: Rebecca Brown, Sophia Wrench, Ritu Mahajan, Gina Amato. All of you, you are doing the work that everybody relies on, because, as I said early on, first they come for people who don't look like you, and then they come for you. And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Public Counsel. Thank you to the ACLU and the rest of the lawyers who worked on this. But great work. You argued the case. You won the motion. And frankly, you're keeping the Constitution alive for everybody. Mark Rosenbaum of Public Counsel, I am so grateful to you, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for those very kind words, and great to be your friend and your colleague in all of this. Thank you.